Well, it's Monday and we might be having the Monday afternoon blues, except for the fact we're going to be joining Pat McGart, who will chase the blues away. How are you, Pat?
Afternoon, Jude. That's grand. It's one of those days, Jude. It's sort of, I'm going to keep repeating it, but the autumnal feel is definitely here.
Are you meeting the day with a smile on your lips and a song in your heart?
What do you call it? You know, I don't really care. Jude, what is it Billy Connolly said? There's no such thing as bad weather, just bad clothing. Like if it's raining, put on a coat, you know.
Exactly. And you've finished all your cutting of your lawn, as I have myself.
What a way to spend a day.
Lawn isn't the word to use of yours; it's acreage rather than lawn.
Sure, it is actually. You know, and it's when I was rich and famous, I should have bought myself a sit-on lawnmower, but I've got the equivalent of a push lawnmower. And by God, by the time you're finished, you know it.
That or had a man employ a gardener who could live in gardening.
I remember watching a film, Hugh Leonard, about his father working for someone, was it Lady Guinness or somewhere, and all the rest of it. You know, and I always thought, you know, Jude, I have about an acre and a half of around here, and Jesus, you really would need a manservant.
Unfortunately, we're much too democratic to think of such things.
Exactly.
Okay, we have a number of stories today. In fact, they're just bulging at the seams. So let's start with the first one. And it's a quotation that you sent to me that out of the Indo, which I'll just read out and then we'll go from there. And it's about, again, President Michael D. Higgins.
Yeah.
And the quotation from the Indo is, the extent to which President Higgins' decision not to attend a church service in Armagh next month alongside Queen Elizabeth to mark Northern Ireland's centenary was defended last week. So the extent to which it was defended, it's a very long sentences. The extent to which that was defended last week suggests the toxin of anti-Britishness has spread much further through the bloodstream of Irish opinion than even the most pessimistic observers could have suspected. That's a long sentence. That's a long sentence.
When you read that, you sort of go, good, merciful Jesus, you know, what sort of mentality? Should I think that I would love some academic study or something on that level to someone to take apart or deconstruct the role the Irish independent group has played in shaping, and I think misshaping public opinion in this country. That is one of the most ridiculous articles I think I've ever read. It was sent on to me, by the way, by a friend, a guy called Nigel Cook, who said, I said, now the sort of in Ireland, that if you take a position that does not reflect unionist position, that's toxic anti-Britishness. So in other words, Michael D. Higgins, who has gone to England on a state visit, who has met the Queen on, I think, several occasions, has gone north on numerous occasions, but the very idea that someone, the constitutional head of the Irish state, should go along to someone, they call it to mark partition. Jude, it's commemorating partition. You can bollocks it up any way you like, but that's exactly what they're doing. And it's celebrating, because later on the night, there's going to be celebrations. And this is part of the whole thing. So the constitutional head of the Irish state is asked to go along with it. Look, Jude, this was quasi-political. You can draw, no, that's a fact. No, when you hold something to commemorate a political event, that is politics.
Of course it is. You would need to remember, of course, that it was this was organised by the churches. So you could argue if you wanted to, but you would be wrong, of course, and say that this was a religious service and nothing to do with politics. But of course, even it had only been the bishops there, archbishops there, it still would have been political. Incidentally, if we add the fact that it was Eilish O'Hanlon who wrote this article from which I've just quoted, that might to some extent explain the degree of concern that that is being expressed. I wonder how I could be seen as being anti-British, given the fact that 3 of my 4 children live in Britain. My 3 grandchildren are British. They're born, their mothers are British, and they're British. And the idea that you would somehow, your bloodstream would be polluted with a toxin because you thought it wasn't a great idea for Michael D. Higgins to go up to of the Armagh to celebrate this or commemorate this event?
To commemorate the partition of our country. Like, do the French celebrate, the Nazi taking over of the Vichy regime? Would would the Koreans celebrate the Japanese invasion? Would the Jewish people celebrate Germans? Jude, I'm not having a go at anybody here. There's sort of realities here, and you know what? The independent group has almost I would say, destroyed in many ways this whole idea of being proud of being Irish and the right to have your pride in your own nation. They're almost calling it some sort of disease. It's not. Any normal country where you grew up, you're proud of the place you come from and all the rest. That doesn't mean you hate anybody else. But how ridiculous is it that you go along and celebrate the partition of your own country, out of which comes violence, problems, many deaths, and a great hatred of all the things that that people sort of detest, bigotry, sectarianism, and so on. Jude, that is not a cause of celebration, and Michael D. Higgins shouldn't really be there.
Yeah, I think what Eilish O'Hanlon is getting at is that this is breaking with the status quo. This is not doing what Southern politicians or statesmen, or whatever you want to call Michael D., what they should do and have been doing actually normally. And I think that's been the hard part for them to accept. That Michael D., who usually, I won't say he was putty in their hands, but he certainly was willing to commemorate all sorts of stuff, that he wouldn't go along with them in this. You may remember in 2016, maybe I said this last time, 2016 he didn't go up because there was he felt there was a political element to this dinner in Belfast.
The 1916 centenary celebration dinner in Belfast. Yeah.
So I mean, was there any toxin going through anybody's bloodstream at that time? It's the old thing, Pat, that you've stressed in the past, and even more frequently than the past, that if you argue for a change of any kind, there's something wrong with you. In this case, there's toxin in your blood. And I think that really needs to be resisted. If in fact there's a dispute over something or something we need to discuss or argue, there has to be acceptance that both sides have a particular viewpoint. And I'm sure there are people who think Michael D. certainly should go up to that meeting. Fine. But there are other people who think, no, it was a good idea that he refused it. So what's the big deal about that? Why should they end up poisoning their blood?
Yeah. No, Jude, that's absolute smearing of people, and so on. And Jude, when you think about it for a second, it's a ridiculous argument. It really is. Intellectually, it's vacuous and it's stupid. And but then independent group have been getting away with this sort of stuff. Like, there's a couple of letters a guy sent me on this morning. A couple of letters printed in today's Irish Independent. One is basically the fact that our president wouldn't go north, yet we have gone to America and Australia. And he was basically suggesting that immigration is the same as military occupation. You go, Jesus, like if you can make that sort of comparison, like there's no, like, put it this way. If tomorrow morning, I know a lot of Americans, and there's some of the best people I know, but I think the American foreign policy is absolutely amoral, and look at the things they've done, like Afghanistan, South America, and so on. Like, let's not, but look at and see if you condemn the absolute human rights abuses by the Israelis in Palestine, you're anti-Semitic. And that's sort of an argument that if you condemn one thing, that you're the other.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, I think we've really kicked. In fact, I think this whole thing has been overkicked. This whole thing of Michael D's trip. He has made it clear himself. He's not going to change his mind. He's not going to change his mind, and that's it. Now, whether you like it or not, that's the way it is.
Hold on, Jude. Dominated yesterday. There's a program, Brendan O'Connor. It's a sort of current affairs program, topical program on a Sunday morning. I dominated for about an hour yesterday. I think he dominated on Saturday. It was on Talkback. It was on A Week in Politics and so on. So, Jude, you see, we have had a diet for years of the John Bruton Sunday Independent leading us by the nose. What's happened here is Michael D. Higgins has suddenly done something that the old Dublin 4 group, and that's just, by the way, they're a minority leading a majority. The few being led.
Well, 81% approve of his. 81% of people, I assume, in the South,
that is not reflected in our media. In fact, like when you consider the fact that the Sunday Independent Group reflected the opinion, and let's get that clear, the opinion of Sir Anthony O'Reilly, who was the most West Brit guy you'd ever come across. And they claimed there was no editorial interference in the Independent Group. Yeah, well, if you believe that, good for you.
Well, of course, Tony's gone now, and somebody else has the paper.
Yeah, no, but the pattern was sent. Like, remember the John Hume? I'm not going over it because it's a waste of time. But the years having to go with John Hume because he talked to Republicans. I know the old sort of absolute slavish West Britism. It still annoys me.
The thing that shocks me is that Michael D decided not to go. But I'm delighted he did decide not to go. Okay, let's draw a veil over Michael D. Let's draw a veil over Eilish O'Hanlon, and draw a veil over the Indo, and move to another topic. A sad topic, but in a way I always think it's a happy topic. And that's the loss of Jimmy Greaves, who died over the weekend, I think. I always liked Greaves. I remember the Saint and Greavesy
brilliant
show. There was something about it. But there was a modesty attached to him somehow. I always felt, he chuckled almost at himself as much as he did at anything else.
What's that self-deprecation, Jude? Jude, he scored 257 league goals. And I think was it 9 or 10 for AC Milan. He was so honest, against himself. He said he was signed by AC Milan. The guy signed him, was sacked. He says, I didn't like the new boy and he didn't like me. So he departed halfway through the season.
That's right.
Chelsea tried to get him back, but he signed for Spurs, and he probably played the best football of his life for Spurs. But
he didn't say when he came back that being in Italy was like living in a foreign country.
Did he say that?
No, Ian Rush said that. Ian Rush, the Liverpool centre forward.
Remember was it what do you call them? Cook tours? Was it what do you call them? Some woman came back from Spain and says there were too many Spanish people living there. But no, he was a brilliant player, and he's a natural. There were clips of him last night. Jude, when you consider the fact I think he played 10 times for AC Milan, scored 9 goals, but he left. But they still went on to win the league title. Yeah. He was a most natural. Jude, when I was growing up, Jimmy Greaves was the star man, and he was probably the best of the sort of English players. He was sort of the sort of hero. What would you say, the modern day sort of Messi or Ronaldo or whatever it was?
Yeah. But the thing that really impresses me actually is the fact that he was left out of the World Cup winning team for England. Yeah. And he doesn't seem to have harbored any kind of. In fact, I've never heard him talking about it even. Or the fact that here he was, a guy who was putting goals in, as they say now, for fun, and he was left out, and the whole hysteria and glory and so on was attaching to all the guys, and Jimmy just had to sit at the side and keep his trap shut. Yeah. Well, I thought that was great character. Strength of character.
Great, but maybe he sort of internalized a lot of stuff. See, I think it was the game against France. He got a gash down his leg, which required 14 stitches. That ruled him out for the next game. Along come Jeff Hurst, and Jeff Hurst, whatever Ramsey saw on Jeff Hurst, he stuck with him, and Hurst obviously went on, scored a hat-trick in the final. And Jimmy didn't even though Jimmy I think had played 2 if not 3 games in the World Cup, he didn't get a medal. Didn't get a medal until a couple of years back. A World Cup winning medal. Like in other words, only the people in the final got the medals, which is a bit odd considering the contribution other people had made. But during he and his wife, he said they'd like to drink a wee bit at Spurs, but he didn't realise how. He says that was only a sort of the babies club when he went to West Ham with guys like Bobby Moore, and apparently they were on the pitch just non-stop. And he did
it. Is that right? Bobby Moore.
Bobby was a heavy drinker.
I always thought of Bobby Moore as being the original clean-living boy. I mean, he was such a nice-looking guy, and he played football so nicely.
He was a brilliant footballer as well, but Bobby liked the drinking, apparently.
Smiling and handsome. But you tell me he's getting this out of his mind every so often. I'm shattered.
But anyway, they all went off on the piss, and then, of course, Jimmy developed alcoholism and quite serious. But the funny thing was, he retired from England at 27. He retired from football at 31. But behind the scenes, apparently, the thing that really got him, he had a child died from pneumonia. Now, Jude, I'm not sure. I was very young, maybe about a year, somewhere around that. And he was only 21 or 22. And apparently, behind the scenes, he was heartbroken about it. And like it was ups and downs. Like, but another thing about it, and I think you started off this by saying he was a lovely man. He was a lovely character. You know, he all he achieved, yet he was as modest as the days long. He was just and something. See, when they're watching, if you're watching Saint and Greavesy, they weren't nasty. They had some great laughs. They could make football fun. It was one of the best programs of its type.
Yeah, I read an article that said talked about that. He only got, I don't know, £17 a week or something like that for when he was playing, and how great it was that they had got this sort of second career with the Saint Ian St. John. But I was thinking about that, and I don't think I'd be fairly confident that Jimmy Greaves, when he was playing football and only getting paid £17 or whatever it was a week, I don't think he would have particularly minded, because all the stars, all the great footballers were getting the same kind of money then.
Absolutely.
So, and when everybody's suffering alongside you, that's normal. So you don't say, "Oh God, help me." And if you compare it with what many people like him would have been earning, guys in factories and things, he'd have been earning about twice as what they'd be earning.
3 times.
And besides that, see, guys who are really good footballers, I think, they do it for the game itself, for the thrill of being able to do it. And the money actually is secondary. That sounds sort of sentimental, but I think
just go off topic. I was reading about Tesla. I know the famous scientist, the guy, the electrical guy. Now they know the Tesla car. Yeah. Apparently he wasn't interested in money at all. All he was interested in was the science and so on and so on. He signed terrible contracts, but he invented so many things and so on. He died penniless. The guy who's now in charge of Tesla, who's a marketeer, who's never invented a thing in his life, I can't remember his name, he's worth 200 billion. So you sort of go, like people like Jimmy Greaves played football for the love of it, not and maybe the roar of the crowd, the glory game, and all that. I don't think the money ever motivated people like that. When you're good at something, now you're not a fool, and I'm sure he wanted, but I wonder if you had asked him, would he swap his glory days for what happened now? I don't know if he would or would have.
I don't think so. I think, I think he did it because he loved the game. I suppose you're a bit like yourself, Pat. When you write your page for the Mirror, you're not thinking of all that money they're giving you. You're just thinking, I want to make this good.
I'm going to make it. This is how, well, my wife says I'm useless when it comes to me. But it should, when they asked me to write a column, didn't even ask them how much they were going to pay me. That's how interested I was.
Right, well, I must say, anything like that I had, I was the same. I hadn't the nerve to ask in case they would say.
just pay me.
Anyway, God be good to Jimmy Greaves. I think guys like that, I mean, it's ironic, it was the Saint and Greavesy. I think guys like that are sort of saintly. He dragged himself out of the pit, as they say, of alcoholism, and maintained that cheerful, pleasant.
He was going off to some psychiatric hospital for alcohol treatment, and he says to his daughter, as she was driving him, he says, "Stop here," and he says, "I'm going for a pint and a brandy because it's going to be my last." And he went in and had a pint and a large brandy, and then went off. And apparently, he never drank again. So Amazing. There you go. Amazing. So well done.
Yeah. You also noted this guy from Only Fools and Horses. Now, I can't. This is going to be a monologue by you, Pat, because I'll have
no, Jude. Just yesterday.
I've never watched Only Fools and Horses from the beginning to the end.
Jude, I think it was my dear wife started one night. She says we were bored or something. She says, "Come here, watch this," and it was actually very funny. And Jude, there's two or three scenes from Only Fools and Horses that come top of the comedy charts each time, and rightly so. There's one where David Jason, puts his head against and he goes to the bar, and the barmaid is lifted up, And then there's another one about Chandelier. Anyway, go watch them. But Boise was one of the characters, and they're great characters. Which they're wide boys in London on the markets and all the rest. And it was written by an Irishman. Well, his father was Irish, John Sullivan. Yeah. And but the whole thing is, Jude, it's a classic study of a sort of the inner city sort of London, and it's great, and it's set in the sort of in the 70s and 80s. It's just very funny. But Boise was one of the characters. He was always with a cigar, and his wife was called Marlene. And it was like mutton dressed as lamb, if you know what I mean. He was a white boy who'd actually made a bit of money, but he would sit with a cigar and he would order all these rich drinks and get everything sort of wrong, But it was funny.
Well, my version of that in the 70s or 80s was Arthur Daly.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
I thought that was such a good depiction of that whole ducking and diving world.
Boise and Only Fools and Horses would have been very, very similar character. It was actually very funny,
Okay.
Right.
Anyway, God be good to Jimmy Greaves and Boise. Okay.
Yeah.
There's you sent me another quotation. And this is from the newsletter, was it?
No, that was your. I think you.
Did I send it to you? I can't remember now. Anyway, one very intelligent person noted this quotation where they made a reference to the Republican Irish Language Act. So that in other words, putting together the fact that it is the Irish language and tying it tightly to Republicans in the hope, of course, that people will then shy away from it. Now, they'll have a job explaining that to Linda Irvine, I suggest. But I suppose I can see in a way why they do say that, Republican Irish language, because it is a fact that Republicans do use, a fair number of them do use the Irish language and are very fond of it. But to think that begins to deal with the massive span of people who have nothing to do with republicanism and are totally devoted to the Irish language is really just plain stupid, or else malevolent.
They were talking about, I think, in the context of the wee president not going to. They were referring to Leo Varadkar and Simon Coveney, and they said, of course, it should be remembered that these two guys supported. They said that Brexit, they did not take a hardline position in regard to the protocol, but people should remember that they also that during the whole thing that they supported the Republican Irish Language Act, or and you're going, like, talk about spinning something, for a sectarian reason. It just sort of struck me that why did you put it like that?
Well, on the other hand, I suppose if I was a unionist, I would say, well, what kind of how did the IRA guys in Long Kesh communicate with each other from cell to cell? And they learned Irish and would shout Irish to each other in terms of what was happening. And of course, anytime there was a volley fired over the grave of an IRA volunteer who'd been killed, inevitably the command would be given in Irish. So I suppose you can half sort of, I suppose if you're stuck in the past, maybe, or you want to be stuck in the past, it seems a logical thing to do, to tie republicanism with the Irish language. On the other hand, if you've been awake since 1998 and not somewhere with your head stuck in a pile of muck, then I think you'll see they're slightly out of date.
Yeah, but Jude, anyway, like I've mentioned this before, but I was driving through the Highlands in Scotland one day, and I looked at quite a few of the wee villages of even sort of Gaelic stuff still there. And you sort of go, and I went out to a couple of islands too, very much so, years back, and they were sort of they're still Gaelic or whatever you like to call it, still spoken there. And there's no problem there. It's not political. So like just to sort of throw in it that if you're supporter of the native language of this place, doesn't make you a Republican, because it's done in a pejorative way. That's deliberately, and I think that's, by the way, you can be a Republican as much as you like, but it's when it's put like that, it's done as a smear.
Actually, it's not. Another point, of course, is that there's nothing wrong with being a Republican.
No, that's allowed. Yeah, that's allowed. Yeah, if you're allowed to be a unionist, you're allowed to be a Republican.
But you see, unionist status quo. I must say that idea of a language being used easily and in a non-political way. I years ago, I'd say about 30 years ago now, driving through Wales and I stopped for petrol. And there's a couple of young guys, just ordinary guys, but I'd say 30, 25. They're talking to each other. They were talking in Welsh. About a quarter.
What do you call is it Hugh Edwards, the main newsreader on BBC?
Yes.
Like, he's a native Welsh speaker, and you can hear his accent.
Oh yeah, the accent very strong, very strong. But I just thought that was lovely. There was no fuss made of it, no big parading of it. Two guys just standing. I don't know what they were going to do. Maybe they were mechanics or something, but they're chatting in Welsh easily and splendidly. And I envied them. Somebody said, Pat, right, we won't stay with this now, but somebody said the reason we don't have Irish language success in reviving the language is that it was taught so badly. That's
absolutely.
Is that
absolutely? Jude, I'm one of those people who would claim it. Jude, see now, some nights I sit and watch Irish language programs, trying to see if I can pick out words. And I've now got an interest in Irish language. But when I went to secondary school in St. Eunan's in Letterkenny County, it was sort of rammed down your throat. It was compulsory. If you didn't pass Irish, you didn't pass the main exams. So there was always that stress. There was always, and there's that, it should have been taught as a thing of beauty, of culture, as part of our history. And it should have been sort of, what would you say? It should have been taught to us in a way that we were proud to speak it. Instead of that, it was battered into us.
Well, and you said in St. Eunan's it was shoved down your throat. In St. Collins, it wasn't your throat you felt it at. Your rear end.
Your rear end. It's the same, yeah. If you didn't do that.
I wonder why that was. Was it that people were? It has to be. There's so many of these Irish teachers who have failed miserably. Now, I wonder, was it that they're teaching? They just were desperate. They thought that was the only way you could teach it, make sure that people learned it would be harsh. And
I suppose maybe Jude, what do you call it? At the end of the day, there was if they didn't, if 90 out of 100 in a class, now that's a ridiculous thing to say. There wouldn't be, but no, say 30 in a class, say 25 failed Irish. Well, I wonder what would happen to their teaching career or whatever.
Yeah, but I mean, again, that's thinking of. I think it's a misguided notion of teaching, and I tell you, it's one thing to say I would excuse them by and large because that was the sort of. That was what was thought was teaching in those days, keeping discipline, And of course, if you're a teacher, you have a great fear that you'll lose in discipline, and that's understandable too. But the thing that contradicts all of that is even 50 years ago, 60 years ago, there were teachers who taught me subjects and they never used a strap, never punished. And we loved the subjects that they taught us. Yeah. I did anyway, and I know lots of
you're 100%. There's a guy called Ken Henley, and I don't know where the hell he ever went. I think St. Eunan's, he must just hated the place because he was gone very short. But he taught English in the first year, and he loved poetry, and he would get you to talk about poetry. Now I'm not big into poetry at all, but I remember his enthusiasm and effusiveness sort of crossed over to you. And I remember we were sitting one day, about English, and he really got you interested. So, Jude, I'm not saying he became a journalist because but he certainly helped along the way.
Yeah. There was let's move on, Pat. There was another topic you mentioned that.
Jude, this whole thing about empty shelves.
Oh yes,
it started off as a wee bit on the side and all the rest of it, but it's become a really, really big issue. All right, I wrote them down. Planet Earth. I was raised in the House of Commons last week by a Tory MP, Sir Roger Gale. I wrote down his name because I thought I would forget it. There's a place in his constituency called Planet Earth. It had to trash £320,000 worth of produce last week because they had no pickers and no drivers. He says a lot of the labour force have dropped out, so the crops are rotting in the field. And the week before last, Ian King of Sky, he's the business correspondent, said England has become a country where the pubs have no beer, farmers don't have anyone to pick fruit, and where if they did, there are not enough lorry drivers to get it to the shops. And last night I was watching it because there's
okay.
Well, you see, they're trying to say it's COVID, but it's Brexit. Yeah, a lot of pure and simply, a lot of Eastern Europeans have gone home. A lot of the lorry drivers have gone back to Poland and places like this because all the difficulties Britain being outside the EU. And as well as Jude, Marks and Spencers are closing 11 shops in France because they said things have got too complicated. They're blaming long and complex bureaucracy and what else. Tesco, Smiths, IKEA, and all the rest are also saying they're having difficulty. And Jude, I read somewhere, I can't remember where I read it, but they're warning of possible food shortages at Christmas.
Yeah, well, there's certainly going to be toys.
Is that a Brexit success story?
Well, if it's due to Brexit, some commentators would say it's actually more COVID or a mixture of the two.
Yeah, but hold on, Jude,
the
Tories are trying to say it's COVID, but Jude, this has been happening for a long time.
I suspect so too.
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
I expect you're right, Pat. I see too where, I mean, it's not relevant to me. Well, it is grandchildren, but if you want toys for Christmas for your kids, for your grandchildren, get them now, because they figure they will not be able to have them.
Smiths, they're an Irish company, by the way. They're one of the groups are warning too about all this sort of chain of supply or supply chains and so on. But Jude, the whole thing about lorry drivers have been missing. But you see a lot of in the past, Jude, the fruit pickers and the potato pickers in England were all immigrants. Jude, the English people are not. But what the reason I brought up, Jude, it has now become. It was off stage. Now it's center stage. This is becoming a big. Now the guy on last night, Jude, I can't remember who he was, but he said there was something to do with packaging. For fruit and stuff like that, they need some sort of stuff that comes in from the continent, and he says they're going to run out of that for packaging. So, Jude, this is it's a major issue now.
Yeah, it sounds pretty disastrous. But here, I'll put a question to you: are you suffering from it yet?
No, but Jude, here's the other thing. We don't have one of the big pro things. We're inside the EU. We don't have issues with the bureaucracy. And by the way, one of the things that I'm really happy about, we've mentioned this before, it was claimed that one of the big problems that Ireland would be transport, because a lot of our people used the land bridge going across to Dover, to Calais and stuff like that. What has happened is a lot of the Irish people have got around it. They've introduced new ferry routes and they've introduced more sailings. And a lot of Irish guys are now going down to Cork, Le Havre, Rosslare, Le Havre, and so on, over to the continent and driving down that way. They've bypassed England. So our supply chains, as far as I know, are still pretty good.
So do you think, since the island of Ireland has been treated as one economic unit, despite, the outcry by Sir Geoffrey, do you think and if things are going so badly in Britain itself, but fairly well in the north, say, here, will the penny drop, do you think, eventually? Will they admit it?
There's a guy, I don't know, can't remember his name, but I remember the name of the group, the Henderson Group. It's based somewhere in Northern Ireland, somewhere.
Oh, yes,
he said that the thing about it was the opportunities for them are fantastic. He says, but our problem is the protocol has become political. He says, business is apolitical. We are apolitical. But he says, having a foot in both the UK and EU economic spheres is actually a great opportunity for us.
Well, but he thought that was pretty obvious, from the very start. Like, if you're going to have the best of, you're going to have, you remember at the early stages of negotiations, the Europeans accused, who was it, Theresa May, maybe, of wanting to have her cake and eat it. Well, that's exactly what we've got here in the north. We've got our cake and eating it. There's still
I think one of the big fears, and that's why they want the protocol, is one of the big fears of unionism, is this will actually prove a success.
So you get Sir Geoffrey, you think, is down on his knees praying at night and saying, "Oh dear God,
I hope it
make
fails,
things bad for my constituents."
By the way, two or three business people are quite clearly contradicting Sir Geoffrey. Now they don't want to put their head above the parapet, but they're saying, and they are saying there are opportunities here, which is not what the politicians are saying.
Well, it'd be good if some of the spokespersons for business would come out and say that then. Because we do hear some of them complaining about the difficulties. I'd like to, if it's as good as you say, I'm sort of saddened that more business people or business organizations haven't got the guts to come out and say what's the facts of the matter, rather than the sort of myths of the matter that have been propagated by the DP. Okay. Right. Oh, well, yes. Oh, yes. This is another item I saw. And I thought it was interesting. I don't think we'll make this the last one. Michael Collins had a walking stick. This sounds like a joke, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Michael Collins had a walking stick. Who would ever have thought it? But apparently, it was owned by somebody in Dublin. And in 1941, they sent it, they sold it, or I don't know what they did. It was brought up to Belfast, and it has resided in Belfast ever since. Now, you may say, your granny, it's not Michael Collins' walking stick at all. You'd be wrong, because there's documentation to prove this is a bona fide walking stick of Michael Collins.
What's it at the term they use? The provenance?
Provenance, yes, exactly.
Yeah.
So there also is, incidentally, some papers, again, authenticated by intelligence of the time, noting that Michael Collins was making plans to visit the North and telling all authorities that if they saw him, they were to arrest him. I think that's kind of ironic, given the fact that they're complaining that Michael D. Higgins will not come up to Armagh. And they're not even going to prosecute him.
I had a laugh last week when I listened to all the DUPs that it was hurt and offended, or and like I still think they were weaponizing it for political purposes. That the president of Ireland wouldn't come to a service. I remember years ago, the last thing they, remember when Sean Lamass came up, they threw stones and snowballs.
Ian was around then. Ian Bisley was around.
I know, but you'd swear there was an Atlantic Ocean from Lifford round over to Monaghan, that nobody could cross. And then, but no, that whole thing about Michael Collins.
And his walking stick. And his walking stick.
I wasn't a military stick. He was only.
No, but I should look. I saw a photograph of it now, and it looked like just an ordinary walking stick. Maybe there was a sword inside it. You remember those comics you used to read where guys carried a walking stick sword?
What was Michael Collins doing with what do you call it, a stick? He was only 31.
I know, but guys carried sticks sort of a part of their attire, part of their style is like having a dicky bow or something. But the thing is this, Pat, it's going to be sold. They reckon it'll fetch £10,000. Would you pay £10,000 for Michael Collins' walking stick?
I've had 10 grand to pay. Of course I would.
Would you? Why?
Absolutely not. Hey, Jude, see, there's so many. Start again. There are so few things in this life that mean things. Like, look at the life Michael Collins led. He was the catalyst for the freedom of the 26 counties.
I agree. We're talking about walking stick now.
But hold on. The fact that Michael Collins had that Michael Collins' hand was on that the provenance said it was Michael Collins, it makes it rare, it makes it valuable, it makes it historic, it makes it something of worth. I would pay for it, of course I would.
Pat, if you bought it, where would you put it?
I was going to say someone right there. No, I'll put it up on the wall in a glass case.
And look at it every morning.
See, Michael Collins is my brother's big political hero. My brother, actually, in fact, only about an hour ago, he said Michael Collins, because we were down in Cork last week and we went near Bellnabla, and so I didn't realize we were in Bellnabla about 30 years ago. But then we passed by it the last, we didn't bother stopping. But my brother sent me a wee message. She's brilliant. He says I was down at, we stopped off at Bellnabla. He says the home of the sort of resting place or the assassination place of my hero. So it's amazing you just raised it today. But Michael Collins is probably, what would you say, the founding father more so than De Valera of the state?
Oh yeah, I mean, I have enormous admiration for Collins, and he really was a romantic and charismatic figure. But what I'm talking about is his walking stick, and I'm saying it's a bit nuts. I mean, what you're going to put in a glass case and you're going to sit and look at it all day, or what?
Yeah.
Get away, Pat. You wouldn't
come off it. Jude, why do you?
I can understand.
So what are using your logic? See the Mona Lisa? It's just another picture painted in 400 years ago by or what is it, 600 years ago by Leonard da Vinci. It's totally an oil painting. Look at it. Would you pay 25 million?
I'll tell you something, Pat.
For it?
I actually saw the Mona Lisa, and after about 1 minute, I was bored and moved on.
Sorry, you're a Philistine. Sorry. But you're a Philistine.
That's true, but it's still. I think it's still a bit daft. Michael Collins' walking stick is not an object of art. It's just something that this guy used.
Right, Dr. Collins. What would you pay big money for?
The negligee of Jane Russell. So that I would put in a glass case.
On that note, we're finishing. Good luck, Jude.
Good luck.
Good luck.